McQuestion, talking about things that matter with people who care. Production of McQuestion is made possible in part by individual viewers, supporters of the Foundation for Responsible Television, CF Accountants and Consultants, adding value to clients throughout the region, the Hatton W. Sumner's Foundation for the Study and Teaching of the Science of Self-Government, the University of Texas at Dallas, creating the future, Sundown Ranch, one sundown at a time.
You know, chances are that if you're at all involved in education of your kids and grandkids, that you have at least heard of the Common Core standards that over 40 states have adopted. But if you're like most of us, you probably don't really understand what Common Core is. So on this program, we'll not only tell you, we'll tell you why you need to know. So let's meet the experts. First on my right, Louis Malfaro is a former bilingual education teacher who also served as president of the Austin Federation of Teachers, and since 2010, he served as the secretary-treasurer of the Texas American Federation of Teachers. Louis, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dennis. Great to be here.
Thank you. And sitting next to you is Kathleen Leo. She joined us many years ago, but she's an award-winning educator, a former board president of the Dallas ISD Board of Trustees, an assistant deputy secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, and presently CEO and co-founder of the Global Institute for Language and Literacy Development. Kathleen, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this question: what in the world is Common Core? So talk to us about that, and I'll ask them to put graphic 3 up, and so we'll read through that as well. So what is Common Core, Kathleen?
Common Core is taking a look at what students, both in the United States and internationally, really need to understand and then display to succeed when they go on after they graduate from high school.
Okay.
It's really simple. It's really establishing a foundation of knowledge and skills that they then can demonstrate that they understand what is that knowledge. That's the baseline of Common Core. They're high, rigorous standards.
All right, well, I'm going to look at graphic number 4, Kathleen. I'm going to read it to you because it really ties into what you just said. So if you look at graphic number 4, it's going to tell us what the expectations are. And those expectations, it says here that they want people to graduate from high school with the skills and knowledge necessary to succeed in college, career, and life, regardless of where they live. And so this whole idea of national standards, that apparently makes some sense, does it?
Yeah, I'd like to qualify, though, when we talk about national standards, I think there's a misconception. When we think about Common Core, 50 governors from 50 states got together and signed a letter of an agreement and said, we'd like to do something significant about raising the level of standards of what we expect our students to do and how to demonstrate their knowledge. And we're going to put experts together for reading, language arts, math, and science and develop this body of standards and then let the experts and sort of finalize. But there was a lot of input from a lot of different constituencies around the country. So when we talk about national, it's really 50 states that came together, except there were a few that decided not to participate.
Right.
But, excuse me, and what they were really looking at is, here's a set of standards that are rigorous and high quality that the states would then decide to adopt and adapt according to their state culture and then their local district effort.
Okay, now there's been some controversy about this, Louis, for obvious reasons. One of the things that started in the beginning, here we are in Texas, and Texas didn't even opt in. Why is that, do you know?
Well, Kathleen's correct, Dennis. There are Common Core state standards. That's actually what the Common Core standards are called because they were developed by a consortium of governors and chief state schools officers. Mm-hmm. I can't answer precisely why Texas didn't participate, although it was disappointing to educators in the state because Texas has one of the longest histories when it comes to standards-based school improvement and reform. Going back to the 1990s with Governor Richards and then Governor George Bush, there was a great emphasis on raising performance in our public schools. And one of the key tools for doing that was the creation of state-level standards so that across Texas, teachers, school systems and parents knew what children were supposed to know and be able to do by the time they finished 5th grade, 8th grade, and finally their senior year of high school.
Well, I remember, and after you guys remember, you may be too young, Louis, but Kathleen is not quite my age, but she's a little older than you are. When Ross Perot and Tom Luce, wasn't this in the, I'm going to say 1992 or 82, or it may have been right after
84.
the Nation
It
at
was
Risk,
House
in
Bill
84,
72,
after the
right.
Nation at Risk, 84,
So
yeah.
I'm older than I
So,
look.
well, you probably have done a good history lesson there. So 84, so they started talking about standards. I don't know the reason either, but I rather suspect that Texas doesn't trust the federal government for anything, is what I would suspect. And that's why Texas didn't take Common Core.
But back to Kathleen's point, while the federal government it has encouraged states to adopt the Common Core, it really played no role in their development. The conveners were the National Governors Association and the state chief schools officers, the equivalent of our TEA commissioner, all across.
Okay, so I agree that the National Governors Association and these chief states got together. However, there is a school of thought that says it was really one guy who wrote these standards, and his name is David Coleman, who was a roommate of Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan. Do you know whether that's true or not, Louis?
Well, I could answer. I'm sorry.
Answer that. Sorry. You know, Kathleen.
It's not.
I met David Coleman once at a wedding.
And,
At a wedding.
Yeah.
It's recently that he was debating with a former colleague of mine who's now head of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute in New York. And they were talking about the fact that there was this misperception that he was the, quote, father of the standards and wrote the standards. When the chiefs got together and they asked their experts in their states to come together to actually write the standards around English language arts, math, and math to begin with, you know, what they really looked at was input to put a framework together. So when you see the standards, the way they exist in English language arts, math, and to some extent in science, it's a framework that is, there are anchor standards, kind of broad-based, really broad-based, that go from kindergarten through 12th grade, and then there's a little bit more discrete articulation of those standards when you go grade by grade within that content area. But there's nothing in there, and we know because we train teachers in this area. Mm-hmm. It doesn't give a roadmap of telling teachers how to teach. It just says, here's the information that we want students to learn how to do and how to use the information.
Okay, I'm going to look at graphic 5 because graphic 5 sort of tells us what some of those things are, Kathleen, you supplied this to me. So let's look at graphic 5. Here's, it says the key ideas and details, and this is the source here. You want people on the reading side to be able to read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and to make logical inferences from it, to be able to cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. And the second part of that slide says, determine central ideas or themes of a text and analyze their development, summarize the key supporting details and ideas, and then finally analyze how and why individuals, events, or ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. Now, Louis, from your standpoint, representing teachers, do teachers have a problem with this kind of a standard, or does it seem like it's something reasonable?
It seems reasonable, I think, to most teachers. And the requests that teachers have made through our organization, and we represent here in Texas about 65,000 Texas educators, nationally over 1.5 million, is we want time to familiarize ourselves with the standards. We want a chance to be trained on the new standards, and we want to make sure we have the tools that we need. Because it's great to talk about kids reading text and extracting the main idea and being able to, to hit high points, but where's the text? What are the materials that we're going to be able to use? Is it just going to be a set of books from the library? Are we going to have more interactive kinds of things? I'm astounded at how kids are accessing text now. I flew home yesterday with my son from a funeral, and the guy is chewing text up nonstop on a electronic device. Are we thinking about those things, and how do we integrate those into the classroom of the 21st century? So I think when you look at these standards, and you really, if folks actually read the Common Core, which you can do, Google it, look it up on the internet, and you can read the standards. It isn't rocket science, and it's not that dissimilar from what we've been doing now for some time here in Texas. There are a few things about the standards that are changing, though.
If I could.
Yes, please.
Before we get into the Texas iteration of the standards, I think what's one of the things that's important for all of us to understand is that the standards that were developed, that are the Common Core standards, were developed for specific reasons. And when we competed internationally and discovered that our 15-year-olds couldn't read competitively with the same kind of text that other students in other countries could read and really extrapolate the information from texts itself, literature, or the same level of math processing and understanding. And if you look at the standards, I mean, even those three examples, and in reading, those are literally from the Common Core. And what the Common Core is asking us to do as educators is teach children and students how to think. These are process standards, and they're targeted at the executive function level, so that we're asking teachers and students to exchange in knowledge and the give and take of teaching and learning, so that students can infer, predict, debate, do research, analyze, problem solve, and defer gratification, as a matter of fact. These are qualities that CEOs have. And I'm just saying the word CEO because it's such a fast visual. When we're successful in problem solving, or it doesn't matter, what your title is, but these are the kinds of processes that are important for students to understand. We're not asking students any longer to, go to the history book and give us 20 dates on the Civil War. They can go Google that, right? We're asking them, how do you come to think about something, look at the process that you go through, and then give us your feedback. Can you demonstrate the knowledge and skills that it took to come to that decision?
Okay, now, Louis, from a teacher standpoint, that all sounds reasonable, but here's the but. We got two items out there. One is called testing, which is a problem. The second is called teacher evaluations. Talk to us about where the teachers are with testing as it relates to this matter, and then where we are with teacher evaluations.
All right. So one of the problems with where our standards-based system in the United States has moved in recent years is an overemphasis on low-skill tests and an effort to...
No, let me stop you there. What do you mean low-skill tests?
Multiple choice tests.
Okay.
Tests that you pick
Multiple
A,
guess,
B,
as we
C,
call it.
or
Yes,
D,
okay,
right?
right.
Or in the case of the STAR writing test, the test that's supposed to tell whether a student is an effective writer or not, they give them one page to fill up with written text, and then that is supposed to tell us whether or not a student knows how to write. Now, a good teacher who teaches writing knows that writing is an iterative process, that you draft, that you edit, that you correct, that you make mistakes, that you cross out. And you can't do that on a test where you sit for an hour and answer a prompt.
Right.
Likewise with multiple choice tests. The world doesn't ask us to fill in a bubble when we get out into it. If we want to really understand the Civil War, the historical
context.
antecedents, the economic issues, the
Right.
issues of states' rights versus a strong central government, those are complex ideas that are hard to measure if we're only using a standardized multiple choice test. And yet we have tried to squeeze everything we can get out of those multiple choice tests.
so true.
We've
They're easy to
labeled-
grade, aren't they?
They
I mean,
are.
that's why
Yeah.
I love to give my students
They are.
multiple
Right,
choice.
right.
It's great. You put
Well,
them in
put
a
'em
little
on the
deal, and all of a sudden
Scantron,
they're great.
right?
A
Right.
Just
Scantron,
stick 'em
go
in the
Scantron.
Scantron.
Right?
Well, not
Yeah.
only that, then we can put the kids on a bell curve.
Right.
We can label which kids are doing well and which
Right.
ones aren't, which
Right.
schools are doing well and which aren't, which teachers are doing well and which aren't. Except when we really dig in, and the scientists who understand how tests work and what they tell us look at how we're using tests, they say those are not valid uses.
Okay,
of
I'm going to come
these
back to
assessments.
evaluation in a minute, but I'm going to ask you this, Kathleen, about tests. Obviously, some tests must be worthwhile because we're testing our kids versus the kids all over the world, and we come in at 20 to 25 in terms of the best or the worst, as the case may be. What kind of tests are those then?
Well, I want to back up if I could. When we think, first of all, we've now written a new set of standards, and 43 states have adopted and are thinking of ways of implementing the standards through the states. And along with this was a requirement to design and develop new assessments. So when we talk about assessment right now, we're talking about assessments that are currently in place, and they're going to be leaving ASAP because states who have adopted the new standards are asked to pilot them this year, 2014-15. And they get to roll them out over a period of time. And so there's a lot of adjusting going on with the assessments, including thinking about universal design and assessment. And so when we think about in other countries, the kinds of assessments that are given, I mean, the only assessment that we use that we compare is the PISA assessment. And so,
Now tell us what the PISA is, because some people might think that's
well,
a leaning
and
tower
I
in ESA.
always,
in Italy.
I know it's, and I'm going to ask Louis to help because it's so easy for me to remember PISA, and it is a program of international student assessment, and it's given in language arts in general, and in math and in science. So it's every other year that it's given, and it's given in 126 countries, and sometimes there's more, sometimes there are up to 200 countries, and then a few fall out and decide to do something different.
And it's given randomly. It's not given to every child in every school in every country.
Right.
Okay, but then here comes the problem. Let's just say Phyllis Schlafly of Eagle Forum. Here's what Phyllis Schlafly has to say about that. She's not here this time, but you'll see what she says over here on this graphic. She said, even homeschooling may not help if colleges all convert to the new testing standards based on Common Core guidelines. The tests are what drive curricula, and homeschool curricula will need to adapt to the new tests in order for the students to be admitted to college. So you're saying to me, Kathleen, now we've got standards, we're coming up with new assessments, read tests, and these tests then are going to drive the curricula, and so then whoever at the federal government writes the textbook and or whatever, then that's going to be the new standard for colleges. So consequently, if you go from Common Core to standards to assessments to curriculum, then you end up with a total coverage and control by the federal government. Yes or no?
No. Let's do some myth busters here. First of all, the feds don't write standards. And so now that the standards are written and at least the frameworks are in place, and the states can adjust them according to, like Georgia. They said, we want this part of the standards, but we want to do our own thing when it comes to history or other things, and we want to do some things differently. And each state is looking at the standards and saying, what works for us? Remember, they're process standards, and we're asking students to think differently and teachers to teach differently. And I agree with you on this one point here. But, you know, and so an assessment, technically, is supposed to measure what the standard objectives are. So that's the relationship between assessment and standards. And no assessment is developed by the feds, and no curriculum is allowed to be developed by the feds. So I just want to make sure that people understand that, because legislatively, by law, they're not allowed to even look at them or help be involved in development.
I got that. I think the law was actually passed under Lyndon Johnson in 1965. EESA, is that the law?
ESEA, the Elementary and
ESEA.
Secondary Education Act.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Thank you very much. And yet, some people see this as a backdoor way to get curriculum, and Bill, come up here while I'm talking, a backdoor way to get curriculum in from the federal government. You guys are not concerned about that, right?
Well, the feds don't write curriculum. They're not
Okay.
allowed to write curriculum.
All right. Bill.
I believe a lot of the pushback on Common Core and more recently on the Advanced Placement U.S. History course is due to the creation of those curricula, standards, whatever, are controlled by overly progressive curriculum writers who inject their own bias into the program. Going way back to the early 90s, Gary Nash at UCLA created a set of U.S. history standards that were rejected by the U.S. Senate, 99-1, with the comment that says no government funding should be available for any history course that doesn't acknowledge Western civilization. You folks mentioned history. The Texas SBOE standard for 11th grade history relative to World War II says that the United States in its military allies defeated the Axis dictatorships of Germany and Japan. The APUSH framework suggests that the most important takeaway for our kids is that American values were challenged because of Japanese internment and our decision to drop the atomic bomb. Now, those are diametrically opposed standards. One represents American history in a positive sense,
Right.
and the other is a very negative.
Right, absolutely. And I just want to be,
Bill, thank you.
I just want to be clear, because even in the example, and I just want to be clear because with all due respect, I mean, what you're saying is accurate, but in the example, we're putting together apples and oranges. The standards don't say that, but what people have done with the standards may be different than what's in the standards. And I think that's a concern both for the teachers and for educators who understand that high standards are really important for us to compete and for the kids to be able to demonstrate what they know and do. There's no equivocation around that. What people talk about it being against the Common Core or against what they're calling national, I mean someone's calling national standards, right, is the fact that there is a confusion about curriculum, textbooks, content in the curriculum that has nothing to do with the standards. They're really two separate issues.
I think that's a great point.
It is, and just if I can put a further detail on that, that has traditionally been the purview of state and local governments and remains so even with a framework of standards like this.
I think that's really why one of the reasons we're doing this program, so that person can understand these differences. Now, we just have 2 or 3 minutes left, Louis, so let me get back to evaluations of teachers.
Yes, I'm glad that you went back. So this summer, the American Federation of Teachers had its convention every 2 years. The biggest and most hotly debated topic was Common Core. So we are not monolithic as a profession on our views about this. And I will try to, as best I can, to articulate the concerns that teachers who are not as warm to the Common Core as I think the majority of our profession is, feel. One of their big concerns is that the Common Core is a Trojan horse for just another round of tests that are going to be misused in the manner that I spoke about earlier. The AFT has called for a 2-year moratorium on high-stakes decisions based on new assessments of the Common Core. In other words, we will use the new assessments, we will give them a drive around the block, we will try them out, but we will not use them to label schools, to label students, or to label teachers. Now, in terms of how tests are being used to evaluate teachers, first of all, let me say this. We embrace new evaluation tools for teachers. We don't think the old way of evaluating teachers was perfect by any means. However, just as we feel that testing has run amok in terms of narrowing the curriculum, putting kids into boxes, labeling schools, we also feel that it is highly inappropriate to try to judge the professional effectiveness of a teacher based on a multiple choice test that teacher's students took. And you know, in Houston they have a system like that. We're in court with them over it. And I think we're going to win because all the people who designed those tests will tell you they were never designed to figure out if Dennis is a good teacher or not.
I got it. Well, one thing too, some of the teachers groups, I think the New York teachers and the Chicago teachers have all come out against Common Core now. Is it because of these evaluations, or why do you think they've come out against it?
I think part of it is a fear of the misuse of the evaluations. I also think there is some concern about private interests. You know, we know that the testing companies make a ton.
How about Pearson Publications, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room here? Is
Absolutely.
that right?
In Texas.
Absolutely.
In Texas, too?
In
Well,
Texas.
but Pearson is part of one of the consortia that is
Worldwide.
writing
I mean, they're
these.
a worldwide organization.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to show you guys, just in the few seconds we have left here, graphic number 1 that shows you one of the reasons why we're doing this program. There's graphic number 1. This is a Gallup poll as of last month. 60% of Americans oppose requiring teachers to instruct using the Common Core educational standards. And Kathleen, I would say that a lot of that has got to be because they don't understand what it is. Wouldn't you say, or not?
Yes, I do. There is a lot of confusion around the difference between standards because, you know, I'm a parent, and I go to the local school, public school, and I'm in the classroom and I see the teacher, myself, and my child, students. And that's my understanding of the world of education. Now, I mean, yes, now it's more than that, but parents see the exchange of knowledge. They see instructional strategies. They see books and textbooks. And what they're not seeing is what's behind it. What's the learning theory that's behind that? What are the standards that the teacher's supposed to really teach to? And that's the missing piece for parents. and it really gets to what is it do I want my child to know and be able to do?
Okay, we just have a few seconds left. Lewis, thank you so much for being here from the teacher side. I want you to explain to us in 15 seconds what No Child Left Behind is and why it's all your fault.
No Child Left Behind was the next iteration and reauthorization in 2002 of ESEA, the Elementary Secondary Education Act, and it strengthened accountability systems in states to give all students equal access to equal educational opportunities.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Thank you, Lewis, and thank you for joining us. You know, now that you know what Common Core is and what it isn't, then you either feel better or worse. But either way, you're now equipped with the information to make up your own mind about not only Common Core, but the various other players in this educational game. Thanks for joining us, and go to McQuestionTV.com for more information while we continue our 25 years of talking about things that matter with people who care. You guys.
A DVD of this program is available for $20 plus $5 postage and handling, and in Texas, applicable tax. For more information, call 214-750-5157 or email nikkien@nikkimcquestion.com. Visit our website at www.mcquestiontv.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at www.twitter.com/McQuestionTV or download McQuestion TV video podcasts on iTunes. Production of McQuestion is made possible in part by individual viewers, supporters of the Foundation for Responsible Television, CF Accountants and Consultants, adding value to clients throughout the region, the Hatton W. Sumner's Foundation for the Study and Teaching of the Science of Self-Government, the University of Texas at Dallas, creating the future, Sundown Ranch, one sundown at a time.